Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Lenara's Guildember the 12th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Tales of Uncle Trapspringer by Dixie Lee McCone. I would like to take a moment and invite the DL Saga members, to thank the DL Saga members and invite you to become a member. I'd also let you know that I started a Patreon. This is all just to help me continue producing this content on a regular interval, much more regular than I have been as of late since the beginning of this year. But know that I am going to be ramping up content generation in the next coming weeks. And anything, if you think that's worth your time and energy and, a little bit of Skrilla, then I invite you to consider it. There's links in the description for both of those. You can even pick up Dragonlance Game materials using my affiliate links, also in the description. All of that just goes to help continue producing this show. All right, so this is not a pre-written review. I've been living with this novel for weeks, like 10 weeks with the members of this channel, as I've been actively live reading it to them, basically an hour at a time until we were finished. So I think it was like 8 episodes or something like that. If you want to become a member, you can get that audio reading. Some of it's better than others. Like after an hour of reading, I start to slow down a bit, mentally and physically talking and everything. So it does become a little bit more of a chore because I'm not a professional voiceover artist. And so it's just me reading live with all of the hiccups that are a part of that. I try to give accents or different voices to the characters and stuff, but ultimately it's just me doing the reading. Hey Jeff, thanks for tuning in. How you doing? Wargul, how you doing? You picked up this book a few weeks ago. Well, I hope you enjoyed it better than I did, because this was a weird, I appreciate that, Jeff. This is a weird, novel. All right, so let me just sort of talk about the construct of the novel, right? It started as this sort of Adventures in Krynn series that never really took off. Then it ended up being labeled as part of the Lost Histories series, of which there was only 2 other novels attached to it. And that really didn't continue anywhere either. And the construction of the novel is very, very poor. There are a ton of typos rampant throughout the entire novel. There are random hyphenations on words that don't require hyphenations. There's spelling errors, punctuation errors, grammatical errors, and above on all that, the story's not even very good. If you're going to write a story called Tales of Uncle Trapspringer, you think that somehow it's going to pay off why all of the kender claim to have an Uncle Trapspringer and why he is renowned. What's special about him? And what you end up getting in this novel is actually just a single tale about the character Trapspringer and his sister and the misadventures of him with 2 gully dwarves and him with a wizard trying to rescue her master wizard, whom the kender and gully dwarves inadvertently sent to another dimension. That's the story. And then, of course, you have to throw in an evil wizard working on the behalf of the Queen of Darkness, who is trying to then capture the devices used to send this wizard into another dimension in order to unleash all sorts of demonic entities called Merchesti into the world to torment Krynn so that the Dark Queen can sneak in. That's the totality of this story. But throughout it, you get these little glimpses of whenever the heroes go to an inn, for example, the kender, the gully dwarves, and the little human wizard. And I say little because they go out of their way to explain that it is a human female, but she is just really, really, really small. Like not a dwarf size, but like even littler than that. And no one really understands what she is when they first see her because she's so abnormally small. I don't know why they did this. It didn't really pay off into anything except that she would dress up like a dwarf initially in order to try to sneak through areas. But again, this is mainly an overland adventure where the heroes are thrown into these difficult situations where they have to sort of talk themselves out of it, saying, oh, we're not the kender you're looking for. You're looking for Uncle Trapspringer. Here's a tale about how Uncle Trapspringer died. And so they start this whole trope from early on in the book all the way to like the end of the second act, where they're telling random stories mixed partially in truth of their own experience, but then how the kender that other people are always looking for because they got in trouble or took something that doesn't belong to them ended up dying so that they don't have to go after him anymore. And so that, I think, is the hook that they're trying to say is why there's so many tales of Uncle Trapspringer, but it doesn't continue out throughout the whole novel, and so it loses its luster as a story hook or some sort of justification for the character to be infamous, as he clearly is in all of Krynn. And so that doesn't really live up to it. And then the story itself is just, it meanders. It doesn't feel like it has a logical A to B. And then when it is concluded, it's really, really quick. And it just sort of moves on. It's like there's no payoff at all for it, especially with the high tension scale of the Queen of Darkness being the linchpin to everything, and how she's actively communicating through this sort of crystal ball-like device with this shitty, evil, mustache-twirling wizard who fails in everything he does. And it's even worse than that, because they bring in a death knight. Now, so this is set shortly after the Cataclysm, like 100 years or so after the Cataclysm. So it's before all the Heroes of the Lance era and the War of the Lance, before the Age of Despair really is setting in. Definitely before the Time of Dragons, before Istar was, the keystone of Istar was planted in Naraka and the temple was growing and stuff. This is early when Takhisian is trying to figure out how the heck she's going to get back in. And maybe it was even before the Cataclysm, now that I'm thinking about it. That event is not important to the story as much as just the Queen of Darkness trying to get into the world at this time without having a solid plan. So it's definitely before the Temple of Naraka. It's possibly after the Cataclysm, but even if it was a little bit before the Cataclysm, it doesn't really matter, because the events in this story could literally happen at any time throughout all of history, because they're that sort of mundane and lacking gravity, especially with the outcome. Of course, because spoiler alert, the Queen doesn't take over Krynn. So the story is like this. The kender are sort of messing around, doing their whole lively kender thing of wandering around, getting into trouble, taking things that don't belong to them, then getting chased out of those places by people claiming that they stole them. The old kender trope that we're all familiar with. They end up finding their way into this sort of underground cavern area, which leads them to this laboratory where this young apprentice and her master wizard are opening up this portal to another dimension. The kender rush in sort of screw up the whole casting of it. The male wizard gets sucked into the portal. This baby Merchesti, which is like a demon entity, I suppose, comes out of the portal. And now the young apprentice has to figure out how to deal with this Merchesti, who is going to rapidly grow up and cause all sort of rampant destruction once it does, and try to find the other part of the stone or someone to help her open the portal, because she only has one part of two parts of stone that you need in order to open this portal, while her master's on the other side of it. And so they decide to head all the way up to this Palanthas, but they have to go roundabout, through the countryside, because they're sort of trying to stay anonymous for some unknown reason at this point. There's literally no reason why they should be going around other than the fact that they're kender and they're taking this demon along with them, and they don't want to draw any attention. And so they dress up as a band of dwarves, and except for the two kender, and they dress up this little demon creature as a little dwarf, Nidar dwarves, and they all sort of go off across the country. Cut to this evil wizard and Takhisian plotting that now that this Merchesty demon baby is in the world, they can find the entrance to the gate by getting one of the stones from this group and then getting the other one from the other wizard, opening the stones, allowing all these demons to run rampant across Krynn to allow distraction for the Queen of Darkness to rise up, come in the world and take control. And so she needs that stone that the kender has. So she has the wizard go about and create all sorts of bad guys to go round up these gully dwarves, human wizard, and kender in order to find this damn stone. They send a death knight after them, and the death knight is like a slapsticky, goofy fool who is not terrifying to anyone and fails in his mission and is killed ultimately by Uncle Trapspringer accidentally by having him burn up. And call me crazy, but lighting a dude's cloak on fire, a human can survive that. Of course, the Death Knight could survive that. I don't understand how that one little tiny act would have caused him to die completely, but it makes Death Knights completely lose their sense of awe and terror that Lord Soth instilled. Even Lord Osric Krell had a little bit of less slapsticky and ridiculousness, in my opinion, than this Death Knight did when he was sort of raised, and he like led this group of goblins and hobgoblins to try to capture these freaking kender and stuff. And it's not confusing. It's just kind of like ridiculous. It's just a chase sequence. The whole book is a chase sequence, initially by the forces of evil trying to capture the kender and them to get the stone. And secondly, because they are continually stealing stuff. And in this case, it's mainly the gully dwarf that's taking stuff and putting it into the kender's pouches as a way of like subverting expectations. I don't know. Kind of ridiculous. But he's like incredibly good at thieving intentionally. And so they end up taking stuff from the dwarves. And so you've got a group of goblins going after them. You got a group of dwarves going after them. You've got a group of bugbears going after them. Sometimes they're fighting each other while the kender and them sort of sneak away. Sometimes they're alerting each other of the other's presence. So there's like 3 or 4 different groups at different times throughout the novel actively searching for the kender and the dwarves to get this stone. And they always fail. And sometimes they'll like run into this flock of birds, that like flightless birds that run around rampant, and then bring in a bunch of like centaurs that then are also trying to find the kender. It is just ridiculous. So it's just a slapsticky, like Benny Hill music could be playing in the background as they're all running past each other in doorways, out doorways, as if they're passing right next to each other and they don't notice it. It's so ridiculous. And then the places they end up trying to go to, they decide aren't effective or they can't get there. And so they try to go back to other places. And so they're just constantly zigzagging across Solamnia, across the mountains, across the plains, the whole book, all the way into like Lemish. I mean, it gets to a point where the dwarves have this necklace that is supposed to tell them where secret entrances are to all the different mountains where they could go mine. The gully dwarf steals it because he thinks it's pretty and puts it in the kender's pouch, and so that's why the dwarves are initially chasing them around the countryside. And they end up using that in order to find the wizard that they believe can actually help them rescue Orander, which is the wizard that was sent off into the portal at the very beginning of the book. And ultimately, when they do resurrect him back, and they have this big battle between all the wizards and stuff, and the gully dwarves are running around and sort of tangentially with hobgoblins running around, and they're sort of fighting all each other, you sort of lose the gravity of the situation, and it's not as grounding, or there's not as much fear as there should be, because this is what it's all culminating to. And it's just like a silly slap fight between brothers in their room, you know? I mean, there's like no real gravity to it. There's no real consequence. even when people die, it's not really like it matters because they're all like henchmen and stuff. I mean, the Death Knight died, but he never seemed to be a big threat in the first place, and he's a Death Knight. So the whole novel is stripping away what should be genuine threats in order to allow this group of misfits who would easily be captured and defeated. And they actually are captured in part of it. The demons captured, one of the kender are captured, and yet they still get away without any muss or fuss. They all have magical rings that they found, but they only have limits of usage, and so they can only use them a few times before they have to recharge. And they're using like invisibility rings and like turning them into giants and running around and defeating all the bad guys all the time. And there's just no consequences to anything. It's such a ridiculous story that it makes me frustrated that not only did I perform this story, but it doesn't live up to what you would expect a book about a namesake character that is known through history by every kender why they are so important. I don't even think they realized how important the actions of this particular book were until the very, very end. And then they didn't even really care. Like, oh, we don't want the Dragon Queen lady to come in the world. She's evil. So let's just continue doing what we were doing in the first place. And so there's no real purpose of having that story beat. The whole thing was a total mess and a waste of time in my personal opinion. I will say that I enjoyed the Gully dwarves. They were pretty similar in the way that they've always been presented, sort of dumb, goofy, believing in magic, in wheels and rats and stuff like that. But there is a lot of like sarcasm and wit that they project in certain moments, which actually add a little bit of levity and interest. The kender are really great because one thing that seems to always be forgotten about kender is that they're supposed to be like little impish fiends, you know? I mean, they're supposed to have like a twisted tongue on them that can drive people insane by mocking them, the kender taunts. And the kender in this really sort of mock the main female character, the young wizard, the apprentice, by doing like derogatory rhymes about her behavior and her threats. And that felt very genuine and very real to the kender racial trait that you don't really see very often. They're supposed to be a little bit mean and sort of snide, and they're supposed to have a twisted sense of wit about them so that they can make fun of you and drive you insane by doing it. And yet they're hardly ever portrayed like that, which is a little bit unfortunate in my opinion. Definitely better than 99% of the audio performances. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. You always thought that Uncle Trapspringer and Uncle Taz were the kender only famous people in this society and that every references to them know a movie star trope. Yeah, I guess that would pretty much track. To you, Krynn and Thistlenot did way more than Uncle Trapspringer. Oh, 100%. Yeah. He absolutely did, Chris. But again, this is just one story, and it's even framed sort of in two different ways. It's framed as Astinus of Palanthus is writing the story, but he's writing the story as a memory of Uncle Trapspringer or someone reflecting on a tale of Uncle Trapspringer. And that's the sort of introductory hook of the entire story itself. So Astinus is writing a story about a kender who's telling a story about kender who are running through a story and then telling their own stories that are sort of auto-fiction versions of what's happening all around them to save their own asses. It's this weird Russian doll of story on story on story that I guess is an interesting premise to write a story about, but you would hope that the story would be well written and well thought out. There's a 3-act structure. The first act happens really, really quickly. The second act takes up the entire story. And the third act is this tiny little conclusion. And none of it seems to have anything to do with why Trapspringer is significant. even when the demon's walking around like eating like stools and he's eating sticks and he's threatening to eat people, and it even says like he eats some goblins at some point, rips their arms off and shit, like a Wookiee or something. I still don't know what a Merchesty is, by the way. I've played D&D my entire life. I have no idea if it's made up for this story or if it's actually like I don't know if you ever like played Planescape or something like that. Maybe it's listed in there as some Monster Manual 5 book. There's a Merchesty somewhere. I just haven't looked it up. But it just doesn't do a good enough job to validate its existence as a novel, which I believe is why you can't find the damn thing anywhere. It's not in a Kindle version of a digital book, and it's not in an audiobook version until now with my member reading, because it's just not a good book. And Wizards saw that it didn't sell because it's not good, and they didn't want to reproduce it. I really think that that's the problem. That and the one that I'm reading now, The Odyssey of Gilthanas to the members, a reason why it wasn't released as like a PDF or anything, a digital audiobook or an audiobook or a digital book. So we have these sort of books that just fall by the wayside, but there's a reason why they fall by the wayside. And this one proves it out in spades. And it's really frustrating because I think they could have done a really interesting thing. The Gully dwarves are always talking about how they want to go and find this place, their home. The Gully dwarves were infinitely better portrayed in the next book I'm going to be reviewing, The Rose and the Skull. But in this one, it was sort of tropish and it didn't really land anywhere. The kender weren't even as good as thieving as the Gully dwarves were. And while they did play into the impish nature of kender, it didn't really justify his place in history. The wizard was wholly useless. It felt like a low-level first edition wizard where she had ran out of her spells and she can't really do anything else the rest of the adventure. Every time they do a long rest, she gets new spells, but most of her magic is spent like charming or causing the Merchesty demon to like play nice or go to sleep, because he would just cause chaos otherwise by killing people and just going nuts. Yeah, I don't know. There's a point at the very end where the dwarves finally catch up to the group, or, it's more vice versa actually, but they sort of are right outside of one of the mines, which ultimately leads to a wizard that's going to help the group. And it's sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation, where this large hobgoblin force led by this evil wizard is assaulting the dwarves and the kender as they're fighting each other. And then they stop fighting to face off against this other larger threat. And it kind of reminded me a little bit, now that I'm thinking about it, of the end of The Hobbit, where you have the three armies attacking all at once each other. That's kind of the vibe I was getting with this, but the dwarves ultimately do side with the kender, of course, against the forces of evil, and ultimately defeat them. The wizard is brought back in, the little baby Merchesty is put back in the portal, and then the kender decide to go explore another town. And that's how it ends. They just like, hey, okay, well, we're going to go do this. And the Gully dwarves are like, well, we're going to go do that, find this place. And the wizards are just like, well, we're all safe now. Crisis averted. And the kender just go off. The end. So disappointing. Such a stark, horrid ending. I mean, the other books focusing on kender are so much better, and none of them are really even any good. So, if you really love kender, if you really love Gully dwarves, you might like this adventure. If you just want to know a little bit about Uncle Trapspringer, you're not really going to get a lot of it from this, shockingly, considering the title of this book. I don't feel like I know Trapspringer any better from any other kender we've ever been presented in the past. There's nothing different about him. Even when they talk about individual histories and experiences, you don't really feel like they're anything different than a skinned character in the skin of a kender. They don't really come across as individuals at all. Everyone is tropish in all their portrayals, and Dixie Lee McCone, while I'm sure they are a wonderful individual in real life, they're not a very good author. And it shines through in this novel not being reprinted and just sort of going the way of the dodo. So unless you really, really, really want to learn about kender, in this case, Uncle Trapspringer, then check the book out. If you want a forgetful story that doesn't really meander, then fine, read it. But ultimately, I think you could probably skip this novel and you would not be missing out on anything. But that is all for this review of Tales of Uncle Trapspringer by Dixie Lee McCone. What did you think of the story? Was it a logical presentation of why everyone knows Uncle Trapspringer? And finally, was it the most incompetent Death Knight ever? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And once again, I'd like to let you know that I started a Patreon account. If you appreciate the various products I produce, I'd like to invite you to consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Thank you for that consideration. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of DragonLance Saga. Thank you so much for joining in that celebration. So, for DragonLance Saga, my name is Adam Campbell. Until next time, Slàinte mhath.